A few weeks ago, I had my first episode of Office Hours where I asked you guys to ask me questions about nutrition, health, wellness, and how you can achieve your wellness goals. And you guys seem to really like that. So I decided to bring that back for an episode 2 so that you can ask your questions on how to achieve your wellness goals and so that I can answer them. All in episode 2 of Office Hours. All right, guys, if you're new to my channel and you don't know who I am, my name's Autumn and I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's nutrition human performance. On my channel, I'm typically talking about the science back and holistic methods that you can use in order to feel amazing again. So let's dive into question number 1. So Deetsa asked, I personally am having trouble using a smoothie to break my fast. I feel shaky an hour later and I don't feel well unless I eat a carbohydrate. I'm not hungry, just shaky. What's going on? This is actually a really great question because it's actually a perfect example of what can happen if you have those unstable blood glucose levels. Now, if you're feeling shaky, especially if you're not feeling hungry, that's a very common sign of that low blood sugar or the hypoglycemia. Now, the reason why you're craving some type of carbohydrate is because you're in that low blood sugar state, and that's a pretty dangerous spot for your body to be in. I mean, your red blood cells actually very much so need to have some type of glucose in the body, and if you have that low blood sugar, then your body's going to increase those cravings for carbohydrates so that you can bump that blood sugar back up. Now, especially if weight loss is a goal of yours, you want to keep the blood glucose level as stable as possible, because every time you're increasing the carbohydrates and increasing the blood glucose, you're also increasing insulin as well. And insulin is the storing hormone, and as long as that's present, your body will not be able to tap into fat burning mechanisms. Now, there's a couple reasons why you could be feeling hypoglycemic, especially for this example of a smoothie as a break fast or as your first meal. First of all, it could just simply be very high in carbohydrates. And if you're using some type of traditional smoothie where they are fruit forward or fruit heavy, we're using a full banana or 1 or 2 bananas in addition to a cup or 2 of berries or fruit, maybe even adding in oats or honey, which is something I've commonly seen as well. That's going to bring the carbohydrate count really up high, cause that unstable blood glucose level, cause the body to have a really big increase in the insulin that's going to bring it back down below the baseline and cause the hypoglycemia as a result. Now, let's say you're following one of the smoothies that's actually really blood glucose stabilizing, like one of mine, like the turmeric pineapple smoothie, or really any of the smoothies. These will contain each of the components of the protein, fat, and fiber that will keep your blood glucose level stable. But remember, everyone's different, so the amount of protein or fiber, or even fat for that matter, that you may need to keep your blood glucose level stable could be different from someone else. So if you are using one of the smoothies that I always recommend and you're still experiencing some type of dip in your blood glucose levels, first of all, you want to make sure that you're including all 3 of those components. It might sound kind of silly, but I have come across people who say that they only use a teaspoon versus a tablespoon for the ingredients that the recipe calls for. Now, there's a reason why there is a higher level of the things like the chia seeds or the flax seeds, and that's so that you can increase that fiber and protein and fat component. So first of all, if you are following a recipe, make sure that you're actually getting in enough of the ingredients that it calls for. But if you are following it exactly as is and you're still feeling that low blood sugar, you might just need a little bit more of one of those components. Now, the area that I like to really tinker with, depending on my own hunger levels, is the fiber/fat component. So this is where you can add in something like an extra tablespoon of chia seeds, for example, and actually get the addition of the fat and the fiber, as well as a little bit of protein too. So if I'm feeling more hungry, I'll typically add in, let's say, an extra tablespoon of chia seeds, or even an extra tablespoon of hemp seeds. And it's finding that sweet spot for you, and I'd recommend starting off with 1 tablespoon and then increasing it by another if necessary. Paula asked, does 0-calorie pre-workout break your fast? Now, technically speaking, no, it won't break your fast. But here's the thing, just because it won't break your fast doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to work for your goals. Now, if you do use pre-workout, I want you to just take a look at the ingredients. Most likely it's going to contain some type of artificial flavoring, artificial sweetener, or maybe even natural flavorings. These additional ingredients can cause a disruption in your gut microbiome. And considering one of the main benefits is that intermittent fasting can help to improve gut health, this could be really working against one of the main goals of intermittent fasting in the first place. Now, if you're someone that does like to have some type of energy boost before your workout, I personally recommend using coffee or tea. Those are natural types of pre-workouts where you're not going to get all the nasty side effects that can go along with the artificial type of pre-workout. But something also that's really great when it comes to intermittent fasting is that naturally you're going to be boosting your energy levels anyway, because your body will become more efficient at tapping into fat burning, which is that more stable source of energy. So although it might be a little bit tricky in the beginning as your body becomes metabolically flexible, eventually your body will get better at burning fat as fuel and make it so that you probably won't even need to have that pre-workout. But in the meantime, meantime, coffee and tea are there for you. Okay, now speaking of tea, Carla asked, what sort of ingredients can we look for in herbal teas that could affect intermittent fasting? This is a really valid question because there are a lot of sneaky things that can come into teas. Particularly going back to the pre-workout, there can actually be artificial natural flavors in a lot of teas. Now you would think that just a regular tea would be free of all these things, that it would be more of an infusion of just, natural herbs or spices. But a lot of times tea companies will actually add in natural flavors or artificial flavors in order to have more of a flavor punch. In fact, sometimes you'll even see things like stevia, erythritol, or even just plain old sweeteners that are going to be in teas. So just to keep it safe, especially if you're looking for more of those gut microbiome benefits, just make sure that you're finding a tea that does not contain any type of added flavors, whether it be natural or artificial. Now, stevia won't break your fast, same thing with monk fruit, but it's not necessarily something that you want to have every day, especially if you're trying to kick the sugar habit, which will help you achieve your goals long term. But in the meantime, if you do need to use a little bit of stevia or monk fruit and it's in your tea, especially while initially kicking that sugar habit, then that's fine. Emily is asking how much salt she should be having in the morning. Emily's referring to the fact that salt is really important for electrolyte balance. Now, especially if you are using intermittent fasting, but just in general, most of us aren't getting that proper electrolyte balance, which is why you could be experiencing things like headaches or muscle cramps, or just plain dehydration. Now, if you're using a high quality salt like the Celtic sea salt, you can actually use this as your electrolyte replacement rather than the more artificial route that you'll often see in different types of sports electrolyte replacement drinks. And it's a lot less expensive. Now, the amount of salt that you're using a day will really depend on how much your body needs. So if you sweat often, like if you work out really hard in the morning and you sweat a lot, or if you just live in an area where you are sweating more consistently, then you may need a little bit more salt because you're releasing that salt out of your body via the sweat. Now, that's just one factor that can affect it, but for your post-workout drink or for that first glass of water in the morning to replenish those electrolyte levels, a good place to start off with so it's not too excessively salty is, about 1/8 of a teaspoon or maybe even a little less. Again, depending on each person, this could be up or down, but roughly 1/8 of a teaspoon is a good place to start. Now, Alicia asked, can you use intermittent fasting without using keto meals? So basically, do you have to use keto in order to also use intermittent fasting? Now, I personally don't use the keto diet. I haven't seen that it's necessary in order to achieve weight loss goals. In fact, for long-term benefits and not experience that yo-yo diet type of issue, I found that incorporating some higher amounts of fat, but not necessarily using full-blown keto is actually easier to use long-term and more sustainable. Now, Alicia, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, is specifically referring to things like using keto coffee, which you guys know I love. No, you don't necessarily need to use keto coffee. In fact, in the 21-day intermittent fasting program, I talk about the fact that that's optional. It's a really great tool to keep you satiated during your fasted period, especially as you adjust, but you don't necessarily need to use keto coffee. As long as you're using that proper nutrient timing, focusing on the protein, fat, and fiber to keep you satiated, then you don't have to use things like the keto coffee. In fact, in my new Autumn's Nerdy Cookbook, I even have the white filter coffee that you can use instead of keto coffee and still achieve your weight loss or wellness goals. If you want to submit questions for the next office hours, make sure you join the private Facebook group down below where you can actually submit your questions. You can also check out the first episode of office hours right here. Also, if you're new to my channel and you love the science-backed information, make sure you subscribe right here. I come out with new videos every Tuesday and Thursday to help you feel amazing again. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video.